13, small town, porch view from my room. One night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to a sound tapping. Soft, slow, deliberate tapping. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it got louder. I peeked through the curtains, and there she was, an old woman standing barefoot on our porch. She had long white hair that covered most of her face, and she was wearing what looked like a hospital gown. She wasn't knocking, she was dragging her fingernails across the glass of our screen door. I froze. My parents were asleep, so I quietly crept to my mom's room and shook her awake. By the time my dad came out with his gun, the woman was gone. But the next morning, we found muddy footprints across the porch, leading not to the street but to the side of the house, right under my window. Later that day, a neighbor came by to tell us police had found a woman wandering the woods behind our homes. She was an escaped patient from the mental hospital 20 miles away. She'd been missing for 2 nights. The police said when they found her, she kept asking for the boy with the window. My mom used to work night shifts at a small radio station. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened until one night. It was a stormy Thursday. Lightning had knocked out most of the other local stations, so hers was one of the few still running. Around 2 a.m., she got a blank haze call through the station line. When she answered, there was nothing but static. She said, "Hello? This is K98 FM, who's calling?" And then, through the static, came a whisper. It was faint, but she swore it said, "Don't look outside." She laughed it off, thinking it was a prank. But when she turned toward the studio window, the one that looked out over the parking lot, she saw something move. Something tall, pale, and hunched over near her car. She blinked, and it was gone. She called security, but by the time they arrived, they found only wet footprints, human, but barefoot, circling the building. The phone rang again, one last time that night. This time, the voice said, clear and calm, "You looked. When I was a kid, there was a man named Mr. Glenn who lived 2 houses down. He was quiet but kind, always mowing everyone's lawns, handing out candy to the neighborhood kids, and waving when you walked by. Then one day, he just stopped showing up. Weeks went by, and his yard grew wild. Newspapers piled on his porch. My mom said he probably moved away, but she noticed his car was still there. One evening, I saw his curtain move, just a flicker, like someone peeking out. I ran and told my dad, and he went over to check. He knocked, but no one answered. Finally, after a few more days, police came for a wellness check. They broke in, but the house was empty. No sign of Mr. Glenn. No furniture, no food, nothing but one thing. A small table in the middle of the living room, and on it, a half-eaten plate of food fresh. They checked the fridge. It was cold and full of groceries with current expiration dates. They said the house looked lived in, but no one was there. And the strangest part? Every night for a week after that, lights kept turning on and off in his house. But the power company had confirmed the electricity was disconnected. My uncle drives a truck for a living. One night, around 3 a.m., he pulled over at an old rest stop under a bridge outside of Amarillo to take a short nap. He said the air smelled strange, like wet concrete and something rotten. He had just started to doze off when he heard knocking. 3 knocks on the truck door. He thought it was another driver, maybe asking for help, so he looked out. No one. Then he heard it again, this time from the other side. 3 slow, heavy knocks. He grabbed his flashlight, stepped outside, and looked around. Nothing. Then he shined the light under the bridge. There, crouched in the shadows, was a man naked, filthy, eyes reflecting like a cat's. He was grinning, showing yellow teeth, and whispering something over and over. My uncle said it sounded like, "Come down here, come down here." He bolted back to the truck, slammed the door, and sped off. The next morning, police found another truck in that same rest area. The driver's door was wide open, the engine still running, but no driver, In college, I rented a cheap room in a large old boarding house. The landlord told me not to worry about the blue room next to mine. It was being renovated. But sometimes, at night, I'd hear music coming from behind that door. Soft piano music. Always the same melody, slow, sad, like a lullaby. I told the landlord, and he laughed nervously, saying, "You must be hearing things. That room's been locked for years." One night, curiosity got the better of me. I used a butter knife to pop the lock. The door opened easily. Inside was a dusty room, everything covered in sheets except the piano in the corner, and the keys were moving on their own. I slammed the door shut and ran. A week later, an old tenant came by to collect some mail. When I told her about the piano, she went pale. She said, "A woman used to live there. She played that song every night before she hung herself in that room." My cousin works in real estate and once had to inspect an old motel property off Route 61 that was being foreclosed. It had been shut down for almost a decade. The sign out front still read, "Vacancy," but half the letters had burned out, so it just said, "Vac." The whole place smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke. He told me the weirdest part wasn't the decay, it was the sound. There was an old intercom system still running, static filled but on. Every few minutes, it would click, then a faint voice would say, "Room 7, checkout delayed." He checked room 7 first. Inside was a suitcase, fresh clothes, an open wallet with an ID that expired the year before. No dust, no cobwebs, just like someone had been there recently. He called the police, thinking maybe a squatter was staying there. But when they checked security footage from the small office, the cameras had stopped recording in 2013. That was 9 years before the clothes inside were made. And before he left, he swore he saw a curtain move in room 7, but the window was boarded shut from the outside. We moved into an old farmhouse last year. It had a huge attic that we planned to turn into storage. The previous owners said, "Just don't keep food up there, mice get in." But we never actually opened the attic hatch until a few months later. The first time I went up, it smelled like dust and wood, but then I heard it, a voice, soft, raspy, like someone whispering a prayer. I froze and whispered back, "Hello?" Nothing. I assumed it was the wind coming through the vent. But later that night, my wife said she heard someone talking above our bedroom. A woman's voice, humming. I went up again the next morning, flashlight in hand. Everything was empty except an old rocking chair, facing the corner. When I touched it, it was warm. We had the house checked for animals, pipes, whatever, nothing. Then, one night, I decided to record audio from up there. When I listened back the next morning, I nearly dropped my phone. You could clearly hear it, a woman's voice saying, "Why did you open the door?" My friend Ashley collects antique dolls. She found one at a yard sale for $5 porcelain face, cracked slightly at the cheek, dressed in a blue dress with lace trim. The old man selling it said it belonged to his grandmother, who'd passed decades ago. Ashley took it home, cleaned it, and set it on a shelf in her living room. That night, her dog wouldn't stop barking at it. She thought it was just the smell of the old fabric, but the barking kept happening every night at exactly 2:17 a.m. She checked her security camera to see what the dog was reacting to. At 2:17, the footage showed the doll sitting, then slowly turning its head toward the camera. She thought maybe it was a glitch, so she checked again the next night. This time, at 2:17, the doll was no longer on the shelf. It was sitting on the floor, facing the back door. When she told me about it, I went over. We decided to get rid of it, so we drove to an old quarry and threw it into the well there. 2 days later, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, the doll was sitting on her porch, dripping wet, with a note pinned to its dress that read, "You forgot to say goodbye. I drive long distances for work, mostly overnight. One stretch of road between Phoenix and Flagstaff is nothing but desert. No lights, no houses." Around 3 a.m. one morning, I saw something in my headlights. A figure walking along the shoulder, wearing a white shirt. I slowed down to make sure they were okay. but as I got closer, the person disappeared. I thought maybe I imagined it, but when I glanced in the rearview mirror, they were sitting in my back seat. Just for a second, a pale face, black eyes, smiling, then gone. I pulled over, shaking, turned on every light, checked the whole car, nothing. But when I started driving again, my radio, which had been off, suddenly turned on, blasting static. Through the static came a single phrase: "You shouldn't have stopped." That road is known now as Dead Man's Stretch. A dozen drivers have reported the same figure, always between mile marker 46 and 47, always around 3 a.m. I grew up in a small house with an unfinished basement that always made me uncomfortable. There was a door down there that led to what my dad said was just a coal storage room from when the house was old. But that door was always locked with 3 separate padlocks. When I was 16, I got curious. Dad was out of town, and I found the keys in his workshop. I unlocked the door and shined my flashlight in. The air was thick, damp. It smelled like rust and old blood. There were scratch marks all over the walls, deep and frantic. And on the far side of the room, carved into the stone, were words, "Don't let him out." I slammed the door and relocked it. The next morning, my dad came home and saw the padlocks hanging loose. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed his keys, locked them all again, and threw the keys into the river behind our house. That night, I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps coming from the basement.